Hi everyone, welcome to BRICS Voices. In this episode, we're going to have a discussion with Bruce Director, board member of Promethean Action, formerly known as LaRouche Pack. Bruce is an author, scientist, musician, philosopher, and a friend. He has been associated with Lyndon LaRouche for nearly a half century. He was an organizer in each of LaRouche's 8 presidential campaigns and served as a paralegal helping to defend LaRouche and his associates from political persecution. He is the author of the pedagogical series on scientific method, Remand for Anti-Dummies, and other essays on science, music, and policies and politics. Bruce has done groundbreaking work on scientific method, developing a general theory of irreversible anti-entropy, for which he coined the term dinotropy. A classical double bass player, Bruce has performed works of classical composers in orchestras and smaller ensembles. LaRouche Pack has an intimate and not widely known history with the origins of BRICS, for which we will be creating a documentary about in the near future. For now, we're talking with Bruce on the wider subject of BRICS and USA. We have decided on a discussion type format, like a podcast, rather than a formal interview, so we hope you enjoy this format. So, welcome, Bruce. Thank you for giving us your time this morning.
Yep, good to be with you.
Excellent.
Hello, Bruce. Hello, Clive. Welcome. Bruce, the Think BRICS YouTube channel advocates for the solution that the wider population stays in BRICS, but BRICS is often viewed as an anti-American or anti-Western association. What do you think about this issue?
Well, I think that's a problem. I think that is the case, that a lot of people see it that way, and I think that's a big mistake. As the issue in world politics today, which is not very well understood, is that the real conflict is between the ideas that on which the United States is based as a constitutional republic, which have their origins really in the European Renaissance, and the British Empire, which is the current expression of an old imperial system. And this conflict is based on two different concepts of man. One is the imperial idea that man is basically an animal, no different than animals, and needs to be ruled upon by an oligarchy of elites, like a shepherd takes care of his flock. And the other is the idea that man is created in the image of God. This is basically the idea of all the Abrahamic religions, for sure, and that man participates in God's creation. You see this concretized for the first time in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. And now it's understandable that many people in the so-called global South or in the BRICS would be very upset and about the behavior of the United States over especially the period of Bush, Obama, and Biden, because during those 3 administrations, but also going back to the first Bush and Jimmy Carter and various. We could go through the history if people want to get into details, but the United States itself has been influenced and, in fact, taken over by people who were more loyal to the British Empire and the British Empire idea than the original ideas of the United States. Now, Lyndon LaRouche, who ran for president 8 times, starting in 1976, led a movement to educate the world, but also the American people, and to seek a shift in the United States back to our traditional American concepts, which I could go into, and that's what Promethean Pack and Promethean Action are doing right now. And we believe that President Trump, who is now running for re-election, was also thinking in this direction very much. And that if we hopefully see the re-election of President Trump to a second term, that you will see it. You saw this in the first, to a certain extent, in his first administration. You'll see it again in the second administration. Back towards the kind of idea that LaRouche advocated. And specifically with respect to the BRICS, LaRouche proposed that there be an alliance with the core of which would be United States, Russia, China, and India, because these are big powers, big nations. It's not to exclude other nations, but this alliance of those four would be necessary to have come to some type of common agreements to dismantle the institutions which are the institutions of the British Empire and the policies such as globalization, and reestablish a community of principle among nations that is based on fostering cooperation for scientific and technological development for mankind. I think that's a short view of it. So I understand that many people who think of the BRICS today, largely because of the British Empire's propaganda machine, would think that it needs to be anti-American, that's a big mistake. That the only way we are going to chart a very positive future for mankind is with the kind of alliance that LaRouche advocated.
Yeah, positive. We're definitely looking for a positive journey in this fight. So, yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to, I want to share something with the audience because I really want to make sure that they understand what this system is, because we really don't talk about it. So let me just bring this up. So just on the British Empire, this is a diagram with reference to Australia. And feel free to jump in too, Bruce. I'm just showing this. If you notice here, the Bank of England is above the Bank of International Settlements, right? So the BIS is the bank for the central banks. Below that, you start to have the institutions for each country. And then you have the central bank. So this is the British Empire. This exists today. This is what Bruce is talking about. We need to confront that this is the system, right? This is what's going on. Make no mistake. So I just wanted to confirm that and really bring that home. But I also want to show this, and sorry to be a little bit boring, I'm going to read a little bit, but this is from the Schiller Institute about how why are we talking to Bruce? Well, we're talking to Bruce because he's a long-time crowd there of Lyndon LaRouche. So I'm going to show here, just the title here, A New Bretton Woods. So on February 15 to the 17th, 1997, in an appeal to President Clinton, was adopted by an acclamation at the semi-annual conference at the Schiller Institute, calling on him to convoke a new Bretton Woods conference. So that's 1997, and just continuing on. On October 19th, 2000, 25 Italian senators, 1/4 of the Italian Senate, introduced a motion to bind their government to seek a summit to save the world from the devastating effects of today's speculation-driven global economic system, right? This the British criminal financial empire. Continuing, the Senate move came 1 week after Lyndon LaRouche visited Rome, where, in testimony before an informal hearing of the Italian Chamber of Deputies Foreign Relations Committee, LaRouche elaborated the concepts embraced in the Senate motion. And this Italian Senate motion was officially presented in December 2000 to the Interparliamentary Group for the Jubilee 2000, which is acting to implement Pope John Paul II's call for debt forgiveness for impoverished nations. In the United States, various state legislators are discussing the new Bretton Woods proposal, and resolutions have been introduced in some legislatures, and it passed in the Alabama State Assembly. Sorry, reading a bit there, but I just wanted to show this connection. So in calling for a new Bretton Woods, Lyndon LaRouche has specified 5 steps that must be taken today. So the 5th step says here, a global recovery program must be adopted to foster immediate recovery in world hard commodity trade and to provide an urgently wanted general stimulant for the private economies of the participating nations. The core of such a recovery program is the Eurasian land bridge, creating corridors of high technology infrastructural and industrial development with spiral arms extending to Africa and the Americas. So that's, anyway, I just wanted to show that connection, right? Why are we talking to Bruce? Why are we talking to Promethean Action? Why are we talking about Lyndon LaRouche? This is a history there. So, yeah. Anyway, if you may want to say something about that, Bruce, that's
Well, let me give a very brief history, which might clarify that for your viewers.
Okay. Please.
It's well documented that you have to really go back to the administration of Franklin Roosevelt. And if you think about the state of the world in after the crash of 1929, in 1930s, there was a lot of pessimism in the world. The British Empire was dominant along with the Dutch, Belgian, Portuguese, Spanish empires. And every country in Europe basically went fascist, had fascist governments. There was a lot of pessimism worldwide that said that the only way to deal with a financial and economic crisis like the world was undergoing was to implement fascism worldwide. In fact, the German edition of John Maynard Keynes's book on economics, in the introduction said that his policies, the Keynesian economic policies, could not be implemented in a democratic society like the United States, but only under a society like Nazi Germany.
Oh, wow.
The British were very much in favor. As Churchill backed Mussolini's rise to power in Italy, and was a great fan of Mussolini. The British were very much in support of the Nazis. In fact, as most your viewers probably know, that the King of England had to abdicate because of the embarrassing support of many of him and his family for the Nazis. And when it became the original foreign policy of the British Empire was that to provoke a war between Hitler and Russia, the Soviet Union at that time, and have two countries bleed each other out. Of course, the German military was smart enough to know that they couldn't fight an Eastern Front until they fought a Western Front, and they then invaded France and started the war with England. The British came to Roosevelt for help, and Roosevelt said, before entering the war, in their famous meeting on the battleship up in off the coast of Newfoundland, that the U.S. will not enter the war to protect the British Empire. That at the end, that this war and these conflicts were caused by the European empires, the British Empire, the French Empire, the Portuguese Empire, Dutch Empire, and that at the end of the war, we are going to dismantle all these empires, and we're going to use and help facilitate the kind of methods which the United States used during the 30s to get out of the Depression. Roosevelt's major public works projects like the water projects and other things, we could go into detail of that. And that created a massive industrial base that actually won the war. And that the U.S., this was going to be what Roosevelt called the American century, which was not a century of American dominance, but a century of aiding the newly freed colonies from these empires to adopt the American methods, which could build them up as independent, functioning industrial economies. And throughout the war, this is documented firsthand knowledge by Elliott Roosevelt, his son's book, that he had repeated arguments with Churchill about this. Now, of course, as you know, Roosevelt died before the war even ended. And immediately upon Roosevelt's death, the British came and moved in to try and retake major influence over the United States. This even occurred, you were referring to the Bretton Woods system. that at the end of the war, the United States was the only really functioning industrial power. It wasn't an economic power. And so Roosevelt had a plan for the Bretton Woods system, which was not fully adopted because of the influence of Keynes, which would be a gold reserve system that would enable the creation of credit to finance the kind of industrial development projects that he had envisioned that I just mentioned. And so the Bretton Woods system was set up, but it had sort of a flaw in it, which is somewhat technical, but nevertheless, it worked. It worked for many years. But the problem is that the influence of the British and also Wall Street thinking and finance policy in the United States is push away from an industrial economy into a financialized economy, eventually led to the collapse of the Bretton Woods system in 1971, August 15th, 1971. Now, LaRouche, who was an economist at that time, forecast that and he was the only one who forecast that. And when that happened, of course, he became quite famous and his political movement began to take off. And that led to all the things that subsequently followed. So in the 90s, LaRouche proposed that we go back to a new Bretton Woods system, which would not be the same as the old one. But in the period leading up to and the collapse of the Bretton Woods system, the world financial system shifted from a system that was based on national economies and based on investment in long-term development projects and industrial projects and technologies and so forth, including very advanced technologies like what the U.S. did with the NASA program, put a man on the moon, and other things, and that to a financialized economy, where basically the real physical economy that actually functions for the development of human beings became secondary to a financial economy, which is based on making money off money and creating financial instruments. And so now you have this ridiculous situation where the financial economy, and I'm speaking of derivatives and all these financial instruments, far exceed the value of the physical economy. And that is coming to a head. It's already, blew up in 2008, 2009, which is the latest. It's going to blow up again. And it would be better to straighten things out now rather than try and pick up the pieces after another global financial crash. And that would be the new Bretton Woods.
Right. Okay.
And back just to reference what Anastasia was saying, I don't see any way that can be done without the United States changing its policy and reestablishing the dollar as a valuable reserve currency, because I don't see any other alternative to it. If the U.S. dollar continues to collapse and U.S. policy continues to undermine the value of the dollar, I understand that people are going to search for alternatives, like what you see in the BRICS nations where they're trading in local currencies. But I think that will not be as beneficial and productive as a new Bretton Woods type system, in which you can get joint development projects and investments for very high technology. That has to be the focus.
Yeah, I wonder whether, one of the things we got several points wanted to sort of inject into this discussion, and one of them is, would the USA ever willingly join BRICS? Because it looks like the idea was the new Bretton Woods, and the BRICS is sort of taking on the elements of that, but not with it's hard going. It's great to hear, and the different wins, and everyone's sort of going at it. We're reporting about the different cooperations, but they're struggling, in this geopolitical landscape. Would USA ever willingly join, or Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think the U.S. Well, I don't necessarily pose it that way of the USA
Mm.
joining the BRICS. What I see is something different,
Mm.
which is first of all winning the fight in the United States to reestablish a pro American government in the U.S. I think people misunderstand that. If you remember when Trump was president, he went to the United Nations
Mm.
and he said the era of globalization is over, and I'm going to put America first, and other countries should put their countries first. And
Yeah.
when you establish a set of relations and among nations that's based on an open discussion of the national interests, and then resolving to settle to organize relations based on mutual benefit, then you can have then we can have some progress. But the problem is that the idea of a financialized economy and globalization, in
Mm.
which supernatural national institutions like the World Trade Organization or the IMF or the World Bank or the United Nations or any of these things associated with the rules-based order, which people attribute to the United States because under Bush one, even under Clinton, under Bush two, Obama, and definitely under Biden, the U.S. has put its power and influence, which is diminishing now, of course,
Mm.
behind these global institutions. But they're not the only ones. I mean, the Chinese government has been very much backing and involved in these international institutions.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm sure Anastasia could tell us about how in Russia you have a conflict between with the influence of these international institutions. And so to have globalist institutions, which are not elected, not beholden to the populations of these individual countries, to set the rules, that is an empire. That is what the British Empire was. They don't do it. The British had a navy, but they never really controlled their empire by military means. They used military means to put down revolts and stuff like that.
Mm.
But the British Empire was controlled by their control of trade, finance, and this is the Venetian model. This is how the Venetian was, Venice was a little tiny republic in a swamp at the north of the Adriatic. But they controlled finance, they controlled insurance, they used
And trade
diplomacy.
routes.
Yeah, trade routes. Now that was when the majority of world trade was in the Mediterranean, and they were involved in also controlling the Eurasian trade, the trade into Central Asia and into China, was all run by Venice. But then after the re-exploration of the uh, Atlantic and the Pacific, the Venetian families, literally the same families and bankers and so forth, moved to Holland, the Low Countries, and Britain. And their party in Britain was called the Venetian Party.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they then transplanted their methodology from Venice into the uh, Dutch and British William of Orange. The
Mm.
so-called Glorious Revolution was the concretization of that. And
What a strange title. What a strange thing to call that event. Sorry, just
but that's if you read this, if you read carefully the plays of Shakespeare,
mm.
you'll see that this really is the subject that Shakespeare was trying to address. Whether or not England and later the United Kingdom would be an empire or whether it would be a republic, and he uses myths and history, real history of the Roman Empire and so forth to.
May I?
Yeah, please.
Bruce, you mentioned when Trump told that now it's time to think about countries, not globalization.
Right.
But it seems a little bit British approach. You remember Churchill told that British Empire has no constant friends. They
Right.
have constant interests.
Yeah.
So it means
No.
today we should come back to interests of each country. So America should take care of American interests, Russia about Russian interests, China, and so on.
No, that's a completely different idea. I mean, Churchill was being a politician when he said that,
Yeah,
and that's the way the British work. And
exactly.
the United States was suffered under that illusion because the British didn't have the power to do it. But Henry Kissinger, for example, was when he was Secretary of State, said that he trusted the British Foreign Office more than his own government. So, and he had that same philosophy. We have no friends or enemies. We just have interests. But that's not what Trump was talking about. Trump was talking about something completely different. And if you look at his policies, you can see that they were completely different. And in fact, they're still his policies. Just the other day, Trump, in an interview, said that had he been president, he would have personally spoken to President Putin about any intelligence the U.S. had warning of a terrorist attack in Russia.
That would be the human thing to do.
Well, it's not just Trump. People like to attack Trump and say he's a puppet of Putin, but that's not true at all. I mean, the United States and Russia collaborated quite extensively in the war on terror because this is a threat to Russia as well as the United States. After 9/11, remember, Putin was the first one to call President Bush, and he flew to Texas. Russia helped the United States initially in Afghanistan, along with Iran and Libya and Syria, the countries that Bush later attacked and Obama later attacked.
This was the period of early Putin when he tried to be a friend of everyone on the West, asking him to bring Russia, asking the United States to bring Russia into NATO, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, but I think Putin's intentions there were genuine and good. And I think the problem was that the neocons in the United States whose pedigree comes directly out of Britain, thought this was an opportunity to, because of the British long-term, hundreds of years goal of keeping an alliance between the United States, Russia, China, India, and other countries, to break that apart, that they wanted instead to think they could contain Russia, which was a big mistake. We should have taken a different approach. We should have taken the approach, that's just what LaRouche proposed at the time. In fact, he was in prison in the early 1990s, having been put there because without going into a lot of details about the legal cases, but it did originate, just like the cases against Trump, with operations out of Britain. Remember that the Steele dossier against Trump was from British intelligence. And all these initial things that came out against Trump were all originated inside the British. And then through there into the U.S. State Department and CIA, and then into the FBI. But it all came out of the British. And the prosecutions against LaRouche, the same. Letters flying from Britain intelligence to American authorities to get LaRouche, because LaRouche had been the author of a proposal for the Strategic Defense Initiative. And his view was that this could be a basis to get collaboration between the United States and the Soviet Union to get away from the idea of mutually assured destruction and adopt a different policy of mutually assured survival. LaRouche and Edward Teller and Reagan adopted this policy, proposed a policy that the United States and the Soviet Union should jointly develop missile defense systems. And that way you could reduce the danger of nuclear war rather than trying to do it under the regime of MAD and arms control. Anyway, that's another story. We can talk about it if you want. But the fact is, at the end, and LaRouche was also involved in discussions at the time with Soviet officials and communicating back and forth with the Reagan administration about that proposal. And in his discussions, the Soviet officials initially were interested, and then they later said they would never back that policy, and they would use influence in the United States, particularly through the Democratic Party, to prevent it from happening. And LaRouche warned that if they did that, you would have an arms race, which would eventually collapse the Soviet economy, and that's what happened. So after that happened, as you know, there were triumphalists in the United States and the UK. This is the end of history, and we can now run the world. And that policy prevailed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that had the United States listened to LaRouche at that time, we wouldn't be having the conflicts now. And I also believe, as Trump says, that if he were president, you never would have had the war break out in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, that this could have been resolved.
We could really do with...
Even about the war in Ukraine. We know that Boris Johnson was one who persuaded Ukrainian president to continue this war.
Yeah, and in fact, people make a mistake because they say Boris Johnson went there at the behest of the Biden administration. That's not true. Boris Johnson went to prevent that from going on because there were indications that the Biden administration would have gone along with it. They didn't initiate it, but they would have.
Oh.
And then since that time, of course, the Biden administration has been ridiculous with the sanctions and with everything else. But you see, the American people are rejecting that. That's why there's doubt now and big reaction against the funding for the war. It has to be brought to an end.
Bruce,
Ukraine's situation goes back long before that, right? The 2014 and the coup and so forth.
Bruce, you think that if Trump is a president, he will be able to declare the United Kingdom as a source of evil?
Well, I don't think that's necessarily the way to do it. I think that
and maybe go towards BRICS instead of British Empire.
That would be great.
British imperialistic approach.
Well, no, I don't think that's necessary. Well, I mean, people should know the history. But the way this has to work is, as I said in the beginning, a distinction has to be made between the country of the United Kingdom and the government and of the people and the empire, the imperial tendency.
Yeah, but it seems that Britons stay in a shadow. In a shadow.
That's the way they do it. They've done that ever since
manipulating by countries.
Yeah, British diplomats go around the world criticizing the United States for all the evils that they perpetrate. I've seen that, and this is the way the British are highly skilled at that kind of diplomacy. But as I say, you look at the leadership in the foreign ministries of most countries, and the people who rise up in the corporations, the businesses, the financial institutions. Where do they get their training from? But it's also the bureaucracies, you see, and that's the problem we have in the United States. Some people call it the deep state, but I don't like that term. But it's these permanent bureaucracies. Politicians come and go, but you have these permanent bureaucracies, and these are the people who have who set the policy. And now you have, of course, we saw that erupt with Trump because Trump tried to take on that. Permanent bureaucracy.
He battled that. He really battled that. I mean, 4 years long, right? We all watched it. He's
planning to do it again, and that's why I really hope that he succeeds in becoming president.
Yeah, I would love to see Trump being like Putin, this is one of the things we want to bring up. Like Putin, actually, I'm going to show that video now because this is, actually, I'll say, like Putin, people are really enamored with Putin, with the strong, firm, good moral leadership, courageous leadership. And imagine if Trump comes through and starts being like that on the world stage, and all these countries, the BRICS countries, are moving, the SCO countries, moving in this direction, and Trump comes along and says, yeah, let's talk. Let's make a deal. That would be amazing. I'll just show this video, all right? I'm just going to break in here.
Okay.
All right, surprise you.
If Vladimir Putin were running against Joe Biden for president, who would you vote for?
For our country? That's a hard question. Probably Putin.
It is?
Yeah, I don't think Putin's as bad as people want to.
You would vote for Vladimir Putin?
I would. Over Biden? Hell yeah.
You would vote for Vladimir Putin for president of the United States?
Putin wants to go back to good morality. He doesn't allow.
There you go. It's going around the internet at the moment. We thought that was a bit of a...
I don't think it's an uncommon view among many people in the United States.
No.
Not that they, agree with everything Putin does or says, because they probably don't know, but they do see that. But it's not the strength. It's not, I'm a strong, tough guy. That's a big mistake. That's a British idea.
Oh.
It's more that, and you saw this, every time Trump tried to meet with Putin, the establishment tried to interfere with that.
Yeah.
The media, they said Trump met with Putin and he didn't let anybody in the room. Well, ever since the end of World War II, ever since Roosevelt, every American president met with the leadership of the Soviet Union or Russia privately, and nobody cared.
Mm.
So what's going on here? And it's all because Trump had an idea. Look, the United States and Russia have to collaborate on things that are our mutual interest. We collaborate still, even under these conditions, for example, in space development. It's not enough. We should collaborate more in space development. The United States and Russia certainly need to collaborate on anti-terrorism. And the breakdown of that collaboration under the Biden administration, I think has really caused an extremely dangerous situation worldwide. The United States needs to collaborate with China on advanced technology. Now, there are obviously conflicts, on things that go on between these two countries, but it's a mistake on the part of the United States to think that our policy should be to ensure our prosperity by trying to stop someone else's prosperity. You just look at the effects of the sanctions, for example, since the war in Ukraine started. I mean, I remember clear as day that after the war broke out, Biden said that within 2 months, Russia's economy will completely collapse and the Russian military would completely collapse. And of course, the opposite has happened, despite the sanctions and everything else. So that kind of policy, and the same thing with China, by trying to prevent China from getting access to U.S. related technology on chips is just helped fuel Chinese chip making.
Just 2 days ago, that Treasury lady, Yellen, has been in China,
right,
threatening Chinese producers about their industry.
Well, that's a good example because, first of all, I think the policy as green policy in the United States is ridiculous to try and force people into electric cars, windmills, solar, all that kind of stuff. It's bad for our economy. It's ridiculous. Now, the Chinese, on the other hand, have been a little bit cagey in this, in my view, because even though China does not abide by a green policy per se, because they build a new coal plant, every week or month, or I don't remember the exact figure.
Yeah.
They're not going to, collapse their economy for the Green New Deal. the Chinese have done, have put a lot of investment to produce the solar collectors, the windmills, and the electric vehicles, which they're shipping into the United States cheaper than the United States can produce them. So I think that whole thing is kind of ridiculous. It's the United States made a big mistake trying to push this. And remember, Trump took the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accords. So I'm not so sure that the Chinese support for all these green policies worldwide is motivated by a desire to stop climate change, which I think is a hoax anyway. But I think it's a smart business move on their part because they get a huge market. So the U.S. reaction to that by saying, we're going to put stop you have to stop your production, I think is wrong. Although I do think that it's right, as Trump did, to impose tariffs, not just on China. And Trump said, the European Union was worse than China in terms of dumping cheap goods in the United States. And people were complaining about, cheap Chinese steel coming into the U.S., but the Europeans would buy cheap steel in China and then ship it into the United States to undercut American producers. So you have to take measures. Each country has to take measures to defend their own industrial production.
Right.
And the place you get.
If we take India, for example,
Yeah.
that they continue buying Russian oil despite all sanctions, restrictions, because they earn money on it.
Well, of course, and
no green policy here. Nobody
Well, of
talks
course,
about it.
that's right. But the idea that you're going to somehow, hurt Russia by sanctions on oil, countries are not going to do that. And you see, even just recently, when the Ukrainians started bombing Russian oil refineries, the U.S. told them to stop because they didn't want the price of oil to go up. So this is it's a self-defeating policy.
They cannot take all Russian oil from the market, otherwise the prices go skyrocketing.
Of course,
everyone.
And then at the same time, Biden is suppressing U.S. oil production, and Trump, as you know, allowed a lot more U.S. oil and gas to be produced, and that made the U.S. a major producer, and we weren't selling a lot on the world market, although we started to, but it made a stable oil price within the United States. But the idea that you need protective tariffs to protect domestic industries, but sanctions, I think, are counterproductive.
Yeah.
And that's worked. I mean, the policy should have been to prevent that war from happening. And I think that could have happened. It was very easy. When before the war started, the United States, Blinken and Biden and Kamala Harris had this stupid formulation that Ukraine, it's not up to us to decide whether Ukraine should join NATO or not. And everybody knew that was a stupid policy because Ukraine was not qualified to join NATO anyway, and joining NATO would be stupid. So why not just take that off the table? I mean, this conflict could have been undone going all the way back to 2013. It could have been even before that. And so the policy should have been to stop the conditions for war, and both Ukraine and Russia and the United States and Europe would be a lot better off. Nobody has benefited by these policies. These policies have been a failure.
Yeah, it's definitely not good at all for any country. I want to mention here too, it's not really on our agenda, but the Oasis plan. Like, we've got this issue in Gaza, right? The concept of developing for the benefit of the people in that area and creating development corridors for the benefit of the people in that area. I mean, this is one of the sort of principles of BRICS, cooperating with each other, doing something in the interest of the other country, and then the other country does something reciprocal, which is how we sort of deal with each other as people.
For mutual benefit.
Yeah,
mutual benefit.
That's true. But here again, you see, for example, that in my view, that the breakdown of the U.S.-Russia relationship has contributed to the situation in the Middle East.
Yes.
Because under Trump, for example, you had more collaboration. Remember that Netanyahu used to visit Moscow regularly, and so there was a relationship between Israel. Russia had relations with Iran and the countries in the Arab world. And when you had collaboration, this was undermined largely by Obama and Hillary Clinton when they launched the war against Gaddafi, which
right.
didn't benefit Libya. And Russia initially supported that and then said they were betrayed. They supported the no-fly zone. And then when the no-fly zone policy switched to regime change policy, they opposed it. And the same thing in Syria. The Syrians, the operations against to overthrow Assad were run by the British. And it was really aimed at Russia, and Putin then moved to stabilize the situation with the Russian military going into Syria. But the U.S. was collaborating with the Russians. They were in communications. It was a tense collaboration. But and you had a decline in terrorism, and you had stability in the Middle East. But with the breakdown of U.S.-Russia relations, and also China seems to play a more quiet role in the Middle East, although it's not in their interest to have Islamic jihadists dominant in these areas.
Yeah, they have their own issues with terrorism too, which we don't talk about here in the West. We don't.
No, of course. In India, the same.
Pakistan.
So if you had relations between the United States, Russia, China, and India on terrorism, I think that would go a long way to helping create the conditions in the Middle East. I mean, if you look at it on the immediate level, it looks very grim, because the attack on October 7th in Israel was horrific, and the Israeli government has to respond, but the response has not necessarily secured the Israeli security.
No, not at all. Exactly.
But
right?
but remember, under Trump with the Abraham Accords, you had peace in the Middle East. Trump played a very even hand, and
that's what we need. That's sane leadership. Yeah, absolutely.
And when Biden came in, Biden immediately tried to reverse every single one of Trump's policies in the Middle East, and so that's what led. But Trump's first foreign visit when he was president was to Saudi Arabia, where he met with all the Arab countries, and he said, "Cut out your support for terrorism. Stop it. Stop funding these."
That was really good. I remember that. We were holding the globe of whatever that is. I don't know what that is.
But that's what you have to. That helped turn the thing around. Then he went to Israel and said, "Okay, if we get this, stop the terrorism, Israel has to work towards a Palestinian state and making life better for the Palestinians." And the Israelis, some accepted that, some didn't. But this is hard work. But you need the United States to be active here. The idea, in my view, that somehow a declining United States is good for the rest of the world is a fool's idea.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Because that is definitely the consensus that, okay, BRICS can succeed if, this is that game, right? The zero-sum game still going, like you're talking about with the British, that I'm familiar with too. And it's, well, actually, if we look at it differently, like Bruce is talking about, well, let's get America working well. Let's have a good leadership. And Bruce and Prevailing Action are saying, let's get Trump in. This is the leader we want in our country. This is in our interest. And then let's start talking and let's start doing these things together. And we need a major power in the world.
Well, there's all kinds of things we can collaborate on. I mean, especially in the advanced areas. That's why I talked about space.
Yeah.
India, has a very advanced space program. Russia, of course. China is making major progress, although there's a law in the United States that prevents NASA from directly collaborating with the Chinese on space development.
Really?
But then you have also other powers like Japan and the European Space Agency.
As we are talking about BRICS, there is also Iran.
Yes.
Iran?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sure.
They launched them few weeks ago. They have also their space mission.
Right. So why not that's one way to get it started, have joint collaboration on space development. All throughout the Cold War, the United States collaborated with the Soviet Union in space development and space collaboration. And of course, we all know the story that it was Russian rocket designs, engine designs, which were eventually adopted by NASA. So
about space collaboration, excuse me, Bruce.
Yeah, go ahead.
A few weeks ago, do you remember, did you hear in American media, they were talking a lot that Russia is going to place nuclear weapons in space.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's kind of ridiculous. I mean, everybody's going to do that if you're not having regular collaboration in space development.
Exactly. There is no rules, but it's not acceptable. Russians are going to place nuclear weapons in space.
Well,
that's what everywhere.
Obama took down the American space program, and he said we don't need to go to the moon again. Been there, done that. But LaRouche was, even back in the 1980s, was advocating the U.S. Colonization or building a basis on the moon and a colonization of Mars, and this could very much be the basis for collaboration between these various nations, as we did even in the Cold War with the Soviets, for joint collaboration. China's gone to the moon. India, the United States is working on that. Russia could do that. And, if we had that kind of joint collaboration, that would be a very good start. Another area would be fusion research and development.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. To rapidly develop, the global South countries, they're continuously looking at that. It's really important. Yeah.
Well, if you have whoever gets fusion is going to open up a whole new. I mean, that's going to be a bigger effect on the world economy as electricity was in the end of the 19th century.
We need it down here, Bruce. I'll tell you what. Like all the countries, because we were suffering. Yeah, even in America, an advanced economy. Yeah, I mean, Texas had the blackouts, right, a year ago. We had the same thing here in South Australia state. Blackouts because they're transitioning to the green economy. Nuclear power is banned in Australia. I mean, we can't even have something like thorium, right, which is a we can't even have thorium, right? So, yes, we do need to develop. But
there's a lot of thorium too.
Yeah.
And they're building a lot of nuclear reactors. And the Chinese are building a lot of nuclear reactors. Of course, Russia builds very good nuclear reactors. So, I mean, we don't even have to get to fusion. The United States has stupidly got out of nuclear power in the early 1980s. But we just opened up the first nuclear power plant since then. In Georgia.
Germany has nuclear plants also, but they closed them because of that green energy and so on. And as soon as Nord Stream was blown up, they they decided to go back to coal.
Yeah, coal instead of nuclear.
Exactly. And no one opens their mouth to talk about green energy anymore.
It's become, people are starting to but the mistake is you have to admit the mistake. And that's where I think Trump deserves a lot of credit, because he took the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accords. And at the same time, when both Russia and China we're still insisting that people join, that we have to have a global alliance against climate change, and that's a ridiculous policy. There's no problem with climate change. That's a made up story.
Yeah, that's one thing, we need to criticize the
Also,
BRICS about, because we
also
don't
we
really
should
criticize.
yeah,
Go ahead.
in BRICS they support this policy. They are talking also in Russia. They are talking not so much as in Europe, of course, but we have because we export oil and gas.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of nuclear plants. China, all BRICS countries, they have nuclear plants, and now even newcomers of BRICS, Egypt, for example, Russia will build a nuclear plant even there.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's
BRICS countries will be with nuclear energy.
Yeah.
And Europe will be with windmills.
Yeah. And the United States, and that was a very stupid policy. I would hope also that we now have companies in the U.S. that have designed fourth generation nuclear reactors, and you could mass produce these things like Russia does, standardized, much cheaper, and they would be not just beneficial for use here, but also export, and also these small modular nuclear reactors, which are smaller reactors that you can mass produce. And for developing countries, you can install them. And then as their capability grows, their grid and so forth, you can add more modules, more units. So you can start with a 100 megawatt or 50 megawatt reactor, and then just add to it as your capacity to distribute the electricity. So the nuclear power is long overdue to be mass produced and mass deployed. It's
modern plants. And I have to constantly say that to people when I have this conversation with them. We're talking the fifth, sixth generation plants have none of the safety concerns that the first and second generation have. They're completely different. They're completely safe.
Even the first and second generation plants were quite safe. There were no real accidents. The worst was Chernobyl, but that was a different design, and that was a Soviet design, and Russians not using that anymore anyway. So, that was
maybe the question is because to run nuclear plant you need uranium.
Yeah.
And the only country to export uranium is Russia.
Right now, the United States has tremendous reserves of uranium, but we shut down.
Why do they buy it from Russia?
Because they shut down uranium mining in the United States as part of the anti-nuclear stuff going back to the 80s. Yeah. And that could be revived. Canada also has some uranium. You're right. Russia is the only one that's exporting it now. But there's lots of other sources of uranium, but there's no problem as far as I'm concerned buying uranium from Russia. So this is another area of collaboration between the United States and Russia.
Yeah, it could be. It could be another branch of collaboration for.
There's a lot.
Yeah, it seems.
But the main thing is
there is an obstacle.
Well, the main obstacle right now, and I'm hopeful we're going to change it, because I think the American people are in a major period of change right now. And that's why you see such support for Trump and such opposition to the kind of policies that Biden has implemented. So I'm quite hopeful, although concerned about the dangers at the same time.
Yeah, well, I'm cheering for you.
Yeah. Do you think that people's perception in the United States, Trump as a magic pill, like a painkiller for every problems that?
No, I don't think they see it that way. I think they see it differently. I think they see that Trump is the kind of political leader who will stand up and take. I think they realize it's going to be a lot of hard work, but you have to retake the United States. We have to shift the political policy in the United States. We have to free ourselves from this influence of these elites that are loyal to the British imperial idea. I don't think they see it as a magic pill, but I think they see it as a necessary, good, essential step that we have someone like Trump who's willing to step into this, despite all the personal difficulties that he's had to endure.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap it up. But Bruce, we come back and I mean, it's been a great conversation. We've covered a lot of different things, and we really want someone from the USA who knows USA intimately to inform our audience. We do have a lot of people from the USA in this audience because of the
And
English
Great
speaking.
Britain as well.
And Great Britain as well, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I talked to many people from the United Kingdom who agree completely. You see, there's a political movement there that is, and also throughout Europe. Even though you have this influence of the European Union and Brussels and the British, that you see the European population is waking up.
They are.
So I think if we can win this in the United States, you're going to see a revolt. People don't want to. People have had enough. They want to recontrol their destiny, and
Yeah.
I don't think it happens without achieving this in the United States. If we don't achieve it in the United States, I don't feel very hopeful for it happening otherwise, or with at least not without a long period of conflict and a crisis.
I hope the United States doesn't fall down. I hope it succeeds in grabbing its sovereignty back properly, and it can come back in a positive way to join the fight that around the world is occurring, against it. And then we've got to build stuff. We can't just resist. We've got to build, nuclear energy, development, water, all these projects that are massive projects in the WIPA in the USA. They need to be done. That will give our children optimistic lives for decades. Right? We really need to do that. And I agree with you too, Bruce, that the USA is a major power, and it needs to get out of the stranglehold, which you've rightly pointed out is the British Empire, which people are not really cognizant of because they don't see it like the military power, the very in-your-face, explicit power that they associate with the Americans, because they see that and the real control that's coming through the money power. And that's what we experience here in Australia. So I hope you can come through. We want you in America to have what you want for your country. Just like in someone else's country, we just hope they have the best for their country. And that's what really the BRICS audience is from many different countries, some developing, some, developed. And so, yeah, we hope for the best too. You come back and let us know how it's going. Give us an update.
Well, as you mentioned in the beginning, I've been at this for 50 years. It's been always a minority position, so I don't mind being speaking against or speaking out a different way than most people think. Not just in the United States, but worldwide. And I think I've done that here today. And I will just, I'm more hopeful now than I've ever been. Also more nervous than I've ever been. I'm hopeful and concerned at the same time. There's a lot of raising a lot of concerns, and their concerns are justified, but you can't focus on your concerns. You have to focus on what you're going to do to change it. And I'm hopeful we have a chance to change it. And I think we're going to take that chance. Although I don't know if it's going to be very smooth and easygoing. I think we're in for a big fight.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it seems it's a smell of a revolution here. No.
It does.
The American Revolution. In the 19th century, in the 18th century, there were two big revolutions in the world, right? There was the American Revolution and the French Revolution. The French Revolution was run by the British. If you read Charles Dickens' book, Tale of Two Cities. He even outlines that there. And Schiller, the great German playwright and poet, who was a big proponent of the American Revolution. After the French Revolution, he wrote a series of letters on the aesthetical education of man, in which he said of the French Revolution, a great moment in history has found a little people. So I think we want to make sure that it's an American revolution and not a chaotic British-style color revolution.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But
No,
I think we can do something here from here that will be beneficial. And I would hope that your audience will take to heart what I said and not listen and resist the temptation to jump on an anti-American bandwagon because there is no solution unless we fix this. If we fix the situation in the United States, I'm quite hopeful. And I know I understand why people outside the United States might have difficulty understanding that right now. But all I can say is pay attention to what we're saying here at Promethean Action, because and what Trump is doing. And I think that we're in for a good positive development.
Yeah. Like we always say here, stay optimistic, stay connected, right?
And stay with us.
And stay with us. Yeah.
Stay with us.
We're going to wrap it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you very
Bruce. We will be happy to see you again. It was
Yes.
very nice and constructive dialogue.
Yes, please. Let's do it again.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone, for joining
Bye.
this episode of BRICS Voices. If you'd like to comment, you have questions, please do. And if you would like to make a donation, please do. We really like your feedback. Let Bruce know. Please go and visit the website, which will be a link, will be in description. And great, we're going to end off. It's been a long one, so thank you very much.